Okay, and we're rolling. Good. Okay, so, all right, so show of hands. So how many people, first of all, have a little bit of knowledge about nutrition? Right? Right. And it's okay to say, if you have no knowledge about nutrition, that's okay too, right? You know, because, so this is really going to be, I think, a good talk for everybody, because we're going to talk just about very basic nutrition stuff, and a lot of you are going to say, oh, I already know that, I already know that. But then we're going to get into a little more advanced stuff too, which will hopefully, you know, we'll build on each kind of topic and put it all together. And hopefully you can leave here tonight with some good ideas, hopefully some inspiration to make some good changes. How many people are doing the 30-day challenge? A few of you, right? Yeah, okay, so this is good. So this is just build on what you're doing already. And again, hopefully give you some more tips and some incentive to kind of keep going with things and make it a good lifestyle change, okay? So, hi, how are you?
Hi.
Come and join us. A few empty ones here, yeah. Okay, so here's the thing, here's the deal. So as far as nutrition goes, a lot of people like to talk about nutrition, and what would you say, what's the major reason why people like starting to talk about nutrition? What would you say? Yeah, to improve your health, yeah, but, and typically what's the incentive or what's the motivation for people to start? To lose weight, right. Which is a great side effect, but we like to say, okay, well, let's keep weight loss, and even for the 30-day challengers, let's keep weight loss as a side effect of putting good lifestyle, good nutritional lifestyle, you know, into our plan. And then obviously when we start doing that, we start eating well, we control our portions and putting good food in, then as a side effect, boy, we start losing weight, we start looking good in our Speedos and stuff like that. Speak for yourself, maybe. Okay, so anyway, but so tonight we're going to get into that. So we're going to try to identify, as we go through tonight, the difference between carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, really give you a good indication or a good idea of what to look for, how they digest together when you're eating them in combinations, right? Because there's certain rules that you should know about what foods to eat at certain times, right? And then we're going to start talking about the bad foods that we all eat. You know, all of us have some stuff that we probably could change in our nutrition, myself included. And then we're going to start talking about how to put good food in. My thinking nutritionally is always, instead of going on a diet, right? Because a lot of people talk about going on a diet, and the first 3 letters of diet are die, right? It's all about, when you think about diet, typically we think about deprivation, right? So we don't want to deprive ourselves. My thinking is that I want to start putting good food in. So if I'm doing a nutritional consultation with somebody, I'm more apt to say, okay, let's start adding this. Let's start adding good stuff, and eventually that'll start to replace the bad stuff. So I don't want to deprive you of anything. I want to see you start adding good food into your nutritional plan. Okay, does that make sense? And that actually makes it kind of fun. It makes it kind of easy. So you don't have to necessarily stop eating donuts or cakes and whatnot, but if you start adding apples and start adding some, you know, good vegetables and things like that, eventually you won't want to eat the bad stuff as much, right? So that's kind of our thinking. Okay, so here I am. This handsome little guy is me, and so, you know, okay, so many of you may kind of relate to this. I grew up in a family where my dad was the sole breadwinner. He would go off to work and he'd be gone by 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and he wouldn't get home until 5 o'clock at night. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And so she did all, you know, kept the house and got the kids off to school, my sister and I. And, you know, we'd come home at lunch. Our school was very close. We'd come home at lunch and she'd have a nice lunch, hot lunch most of the time made for us. And when we had to take our lunch on certain days, you may remember this, there was always, you know, I'd always have a couple of sandwiches. And I was a real big milk drinker back then when I was a kid. And we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But I would go with a liter, like seriously, it was a quart, so like 1 quart container of milk. Sometimes it was chocolate milk in my lunch. And there was always a couple sandwiches, maybe a piece of fruit, and then there was always one of those cakes. It was either a Vachon Joe Louis, or it was those King Dons or Swiss rolls or whatever. So yeah, everybody smiled. Oh, I remember those. Yeah, they're pretty good. So I was actually a heavy kid. And so it wasn't probably until high school that I really started to thin out a little bit, and I started exercising and starting to figure out a little more about nutrition. And I went to university, and I took human kinetics at university, and there was a big nutritional component. So I actually got a minor in nutrition, biochemistry, and so on. So I really started learning on how the body works and how the body digests food, and that really hit home with me. And I started thinking, and here's the big thing, and I want you guys to get this. I started thinking nutrition is not something we do just for pleasure. Like a lot of us eat, it's a social thing to do, right? You know, we get together socially, and we eat, and we get together with, you know, those, we have whatever, the meatballs and drinks and stuff. We just went through Christmas, and I know everybody, kind of indulges a little bit at Christmas time. But I started thinking that nutrition was more to build my body, to build health in my body, right? So now that's the way I look at it. I want to build health in my body as opposed to using food to just fill me up. Okay, so I'm really selective as to what I want to put in. Is this going to be good for what I need to accomplish? Okay, so I started thinking that way. And so as I grew and I started exercising and so on, I started leaning out. But a lot of us went through these stages. So we're going to talk to start, and like I mentioned, we're going to talk about the basics. So carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So here's the difference, and this is really what to start to understand. The major foods on the face of the planet are carbohydrates. Okay? Typically, carbohydrates are something that grow in the ground. Okay? So think about everything that grows in the ground. So fruit is a carbohydrate. Vegetables are a carbohydrate. Okay? Grains are a carbohydrate. So if it's made with grain or flour, it's a carbohydrate. Okay. Proteins, on the other hand, typically are mostly animal sources. There are some vegetable proteins, but mostly animal sources. So let's try to simplify it and say if it doesn't have a face, a mother, or go to the bathroom, it's a carbohydrate. Okay. If it has a face, a mother, or go to the bathroom, more likely it's a protein. Okay. Just to simplify things. And then fats, there's all kinds of different kinds of fats. There's plant sources, there's animal sources. And here's the thing, we're going to talk about fats tonight. We need fat. We went through, and you all went through it in the 80s and 90s. We went through this low-fat craze, right? Low-fat this, low-fat that. You could buy low-fat chips for crying out loud. So, but now we know scientifically, a lot's happened in the last 20, 25 years. We know scientifically that fat is very necessary, and you need good fat in your diet to burn fat. Okay? You also need good fat in your diet to digest certain vitamins and minerals, right? So fat-soluble vitamins need fat in the diet to be digested. Okay, so this is important. We're going to talk about this. Back to carbohydrates now. Carbohydrates break down in your body to what? Sugar. Okay, this is the important thing to understand. Carbohydrates break down to sugar. Okay, number one, if you don't think of anything else tonight or don't remember anything else, remember that carbohydrates break down to sugar because carbohydrates are called rocket fuel. Okay, so typically, now different carbohydrates will break down faster or slower in the body, but they all break down into sugar. Okay, it's those carbohydrates that break down fast, we call them higher glycemic carbohydrates, right? So grains, very high glycemic. Refined sugar, right? We're going to talk about that tonight. Refined sugar, very highly glycemic, breaks down, it absorbs very quickly, breaks down very quickly, and then when sugar goes into the bloodstream, the blood sugar goes up, okay? What is the hormone that's responsible for getting the blood sugar back down and putting the blood sugar into cells? What is it? Insulin, exactly. Okay, so insulin secreted in the pancreas. Okay, this is very important for you to understand. So when you have a diet high in carbohydrates, you're constantly bombarding your system with insulin. Hi, come on in. Come on in. You're constantly bombarding your system with insulin. Okay. And when you're constantly bombarding your system with insulin, what happens is those insulin receptors start to burn out over time. Insulin, high levels of insulin on a long-term basis, so if you have a diet that's very high in carbohydrates over the long term, right? So if you're eating a lot of sweets and refined foods and grains and bread and stuff like that, cereal, pasta, what happens is your insulin levels are always high. And if your insulin levels are always high, it affects other hormones in your body, like serotonin. Okay, what's serotonin responsible for? Sleep, right? Sleep and feeling. Perfect. Two things. Sleep and feeling good. That's the main concerns for insulin. Or for serotonin, excuse me. So if your insulin's high all the time, you affect your body's, your brain's ability to produce serotonin, and what happens is you have abnormal sleep patterns and you get depressed, right? And so what happens is that you see, and we all know people who are clinically depressed or have bipolar issues and emotional issues, and then they're off to the medical doctor, and what do they do with the medical doctor? They give them pills, antidepressants, right? When, I'm going to say in 95 to 99% of those cases, if there was a nutritional change made, they wouldn't need the medication, okay? It really, really comes down to nutrition. So that, again, on that same topic, if anybody is taking those medications and you want to get off them, the first thing we need to do is get your nutrition right to change the hormones in your body so your body can adapt better. Okay? It's very doable, and I've seen it happen hundreds of times with people So, and we can help coach you through that. So that's very, very important to start to realize, okay? So we're going to talk all about this, the carbohydrates and fats and proteins, okay? So, like I said, biggest causes of aging, excess carbs puts a lot of stress on your pancreas, high insulin levels, and affects all the other cascade of hormones in your body. Thyroid hormone, serotonin, cortisol, okay? So the stress hormone, these are all affected by high levels of insulin, okay? From eating too much carbs. Being overweight, and here's a question too. How many obese 80-year-olds do you know? How many? One? You're far from obese, right? Okay, you might be 80, but you must be doing something right. You're far from obese. No, but seriously, you look at people who are obese, right? In most cases, they're not going to make it to 80 years old. Okay, so definitely something to think about there. And then the imbalanced fat, which we're going to get into tonight, the omega-6 and omega-3 ratios. Okay, omega-6 and omega-3 ratios. Okay, insulin overload, we talked about that. Leptin, right? Leptin's another hormone. Okay, so leptin is a hormone that's largely untalked about. A lot of people don't know what leptin is. Leptin is secreted by the fat cells, okay, to give your body the sign to burn fat, right? But what happens is, if your diet's high in carbohydrates, right, your insulin's taking over all the time, the body is never recruiting leptin, so you never burn fat. So if you're eating a diet that's largely carbohydrates, your body never has a chance to burn fat. So all of us have gone on a diet before, and you might be able to lose that first 10 pounds, but there's that, gosh, I can't get that last 10 or 15 pounds off. It just won't come off. Or I got this belly fat that just won't come off, right? These love handles that just won't come off. That's why, okay? Because your body hasn't made that metabolic or that hormonal shift to burn that fat off, okay? And they all lead, so that's the other thing too about a diet high in carbohydrates, it leads to high inflammation, because what it does, it imbalances that cortisol, okay, it doesn't allow cortisol to be metabolized properly. You have high carbohydrates, high insulin, high cortisol, you're stressed all the time, and you're very inflamed. So a lot of people that have achy joints, sore necks, sore backs, sore knees, sore hips, sore fingers and wrists, typically diet high in carbohydrates where there's lots of inflammation. Okay, so that's very common as well. Okay, all right. Any questions? All right. If we go through this and something doesn't sit right with you, because I'm going to start going pretty fast because there's lots of stuff here, I don't want to keep you till 10 o'clock. So ask away. Okay, if something just doesn't sit right. Okay. So we're going to go through the top 10 terrible foods. Right. This is going to be kind of a depressing experience for some of you. Okay. But it's very eye-opening because I'm going to talk about some foods that we eat all the time and why they're bad for you. Not just that they're bad for you, but why. What are they doing to your body over the long term? Okay. So here we go. Number one, caffeine. How many people drink coffee or tea? All right. Most of us. Listen, I do. Here's an interesting thing. So my wife, this is going back probably 24 years ago. It was before we had our first son. He's 22, so it's about a year or two before he was born. We had a very good friend who happened to be our medical doctor, right? Michelle Langton was her name. She's passed on now. God bless her. But here's the thing. So Kim went in for an exam with Michelle, and she found lumps in her breast. Of course, when you get lumps in your breast, obviously there's a concern there. Well, it turned out they were cysts. And Michelle said, listen, you have to be very cautious with that because cysts can rupture, it can cause problems, and potentially lead to some cancerous tumors down the road. She said, but here's something to think about. Caffeine aggravates breast cysts and ovarian cysts. Okay, so that's one thing right there, especially, obviously females. That's one thing why you want to get off the caffeine. So Kim said, okay, done, cold turkey. So she went off coffee, cold turkey, back 24 years ago, didn't drink any at all. And so I was still drinking coffee at the time. I thought, well, there's no point in us making a pot of coffee and a pot of decaf, if we're going to drink decaf. I'll touch on decaf too. But, so I just stopped drinking it as well. But then about 6 years ago, my mom passed away. Now so this is what happens. My dad, every day, would get up and make a pot of coffee and breakfast for my mom. So after she passed away, I started checking on my dad. Every morning on my way to work, I would check on my dad, and he'd have the coffee on, so I'd sit and have a cup of coffee with him, so I got hooked again. Anyway, so now I drink a coffee a day. But here's the thing, how many people drink decaf? Okay, so if you drink decaf, that would be something I would suggest stop, okay, because, right, so first of all, regular coffee that's decaffeinated is chemically decaffeinated. Now, you go to Goodness Me or some of the health food stores, you can get naturally decaffeinated coffees, right? So I would suggest if you're going to do that, go and try some of those. Or there's some other blends that taste like coffee. Like I drink one called Dandy Blend, which is like a dandelion coffee. You mix boiling water into it, and there's no caffeine in it at all. And it's actually very tasty. It tastes a lot like coffee. Okay, but here's the thing with decaffeinated coffees, they decaffeinate it with alkaloids, and alkaloids are a central nervous system depressant. So it's actually been shown that people that drink a lot of decaf coffee get depressed. They get clinically depressed. They're feeling down all the time, right? Because of that chemical that's they use to decaffeinate. So I would suggest don't drink decaffeinated coffee at all, right? In fact, it's probably better for you to go back on regular coffee than drink decaf. Okay.
Same with tea.
Okay, now tea is different. So, excuse me. So tea is naturally caffeinated, right? So tea does have caffeine in it, but regular decaffeinated, or not decaffeinated teas, but herbal teas typically don't have caffeine in them, right? But I would say the same thing, don't drink decaf tea because it has to be chemically decaffeinated. So if you take like a orange pico tea and decaffeinate it, they have to add chemicals to it, which again are alkaloids, the same sort of thing, exactly, right? Yeah. So I'd say that would be there's better choices out there to go for, okay? All right, so caffeine is the first one. So that would be something to try to minimize. And if you're drinking, like let's say you drink 2 coffees a day, try to at least cut it down to 1, try to minimize those. All right. We were going to get Tim Hortons to sponsor tonight, but I thought that really wouldn't be a good deal. So. All right, second one is dairy, right? So dairy. Why do we say dairy? Well, okay, so here's an interesting thought. How many people still use dairy? Okay, a lot of people do, right? It's pretty common. And like I said, when I was a kid, I've drank, like seriously, 1 to 2 liters of milk a day. It was nonstop in our house. So my mom always said we need to get a cow in the backyard. But dairy, think about this. How many animals on the face of the earth, after they wean from their mother, continue to drink milk? Just humans, right? We're the only species on the face of the earth that continues to drink milk after weaning. Okay, and what do we drink? We don't drink human milk, right? We drink cow's milk. So, well, here's the thing though. If you compare the milk protein, right? Milk protein of and I'll try to use a comparison here. If a milk protein of a human is the size of my fingernail, okay, relative, a cow's milk protein is the size of my fist. Okay, so it's much tougher to digest a cow's milk protein. The other thing with the cow's milk protein is that what happens is, how many people get milk that's right out of the cow? Or if you can, that's your farm girl, right? Yes, of course. If you can, that's a much better option, right? But typically what happens is the milk goes out of the farm, it goes off to the dairy, they pasteurize it, they fortify it, right? Because once they pasteurize it, they kill it all off, and then they have to add the calcium and the vitamin D back into the milk because the natural constituents have been killed off. But once it's pasteurized, that cow's milk protein becomes very denatured. It becomes a protein that your gut really has a hard time recognizing. So for many people, your gut, your body recognizes that denatured protein as an antigen, so an invading organism, and your body then stimulates the immune system to produce an allergy to that denatured cow's milk protein. So that's why a lot of people have reactions to milk. Sinus trouble, kids, it's been related to ADD and ADHD, things like that. One of the first things whenever you're talking to any health professional, especially with children or somebody with chronic disease, get off the dairy. Okay? So that's another reason to say, okay, I want to try to minimize dairy. So what do we substitute with? Well, a lot of people use soy milk. Again, soy milk is not the best choice because there's actually chemicals in the soy milk that simulate estrogens or hormones, right? So it can cause a lot of hormonal issues with soy. So soy is not a natural food, okay? But almond milk, on the other hand, cashew milk, those are good options, right? So if you want to continue to use milk in certain situations, that would be a good situation to switch to those things, okay? I would always suggest use the unsweetened ones, not the sweet ones. They sweeten them, they're very tasty, obviously, but they do have a lot of sugar in them, okay? So unsweetened ones are better. All right, there's our cow. So we'll move on to pork. Okay, pork. All right, why is pork on the list of bad foods? Well, so think about this. Pork comes from pigs, okay? So pork comes from pigs. Now, it's interesting. God was pretty smart when he designed animals because typically pigs live in an environment that's very toxic. Like if you think back hundreds of years ago, where did pigs live? Where were they kept? In a barnyard, right? In a pen, right? In mud, and of course in their own feces, right? And they're able to wallow around in the mud in their own feces, and they don't get sick, right? Because a pig is so fat, it has so many fat cells. Fat cells act like toxins, right? So here's another reason why humans, we need to lower our fat cell level, because fat cells absorb toxins. So your body becomes toxic. So pigs have lots of toxins. So what happens is the pig goes off to the butcher, we butcher the pig, you know, and when we eat the pig, it's got a high level of fat, and we're eating a high level of toxic contaminants that are stored up in the pig. Even pigs now that are farmed, you know, because they don't live in such an unclean environment anymore, they still absorb a lot of toxic elements, okay, from their food, from their surroundings, and so on, okay? The other thing with pork is that when you think about pork, what's it made into? What other things? Bacon, like sausage, ham, right? And what's added to all those meats? Oh, exactly. Nitrates, salt, nitrites, all these different chemicals to cure the meat. Those are terrible. And they've been shown to cause all kinds of brain chemistry issues, you know, challenging with children and stuff like that. So children that have a diet high in lunch meats, it's actually been shown that high levels of nitrites and nitrates cause childhood leukemia, right? There's been a relationship there. So again, a good reason to get rid of some of these foods, okay? So now, and I'll be honest, do we eat pork? Absolutely. Once in a while we do eat pork. You know, we're not totally pork free, but it's not the mainstay in our diet, right? So, okay. Yeah, oh, there's our pigs. Okay. Next one, shellfish. Shellfish. So I used to love going to Red Lobster.
Yeah.
It's like Red Lobster, yeah. So the shrimp scampi, that was my fun. That was my favorite one. So why are shellfish bad? Well, shellfish are highly allergenic. Okay, why is that? Well, interesting. Those of you who have ever read the Bible, so in I believe it's in Leviticus, which is the second book of the Bible, there's God's nutritional plan. He said, stay away from pork, and he said, stay away from anything in the sea that doesn't have fins. So what food has fins? It's the fish, right? The fish swim around in the sea, and the fish is actually good for you, right? So we're going to talk about fish, but shellfish, where do they live? They're bottom feeders, right? So we want to stay away from the bottom feeders. So what do bottom feeders do? They clean up the bottom, right? So all the droppings, everything that goes to the bottom, they clean it up. So they become very, very toxic. How many people know somebody with a shellfish allergy, right? Very toxic food. So again, it would be something that I wouldn't suggest having on a regular basis, right? It's also been shown that shellfish are very high in cholesterol. So if you're worried about cholesterol levels, that would be something to minimize again in your diet, okay? We do a whole seminar on cholesterol, and we're actually going to be talking about that in detail at our dinner coming up in February. That's all on heart health. So if you want to hear more about cholesterol and cholesterol medications and stuff like that, come on out to that dinner, and obviously we'll buy you dinner too. So, but yeah, we'd love to have you out at that. But we're going to really get in deep into beta blockers and cholesterol medication and why is cholesterol bad and what makes it bad, right? Because think about this though, cholesterol is actually made in your body. Right? Your body needs cholesterol. Your brain's mostly made of cholesterol, right? So if we go on cholesterol-lowering drugs, lower the cholesterol in our body, what happens to our brain? Dementia, right? Neurogenic disorders, it's all been related to low cholesterol levels. It's only getting worse, right? Because of all the medications, these things are only getting more rampant. Okay? All right, so got off on a tangent there, sorry. All right, so here's our shellfish, okay? All right, so nitrate, we talked about the lunch meats and MSG-rich foods. Now here's the interesting thing. So nitrates and MSG are shown to be, and aspartame is another one, we'll talk about aspartame in a second, are shown to be what we call excitotoxins. Okay, so what's an excitotoxin? Well, when you eat it, things that are flavored with MSG are flavored for MSG with a reason, right? Because the MSG absorbs very quickly into the bloodstream, goes to the brain, and it gives the brain a euphoric feeling. Right? So what it causes the brain to do is it causes neurons in the brain to rapidly fire. And that rapid firing in the brain gives us a sensation of euphoria that we're eating something that's extremely tasty. Right? It gives us that mental sensation, this is extremely tasty. So it's a flavoring for the food, but it actually affects your brain chemistry. And what happens is when those excitotoxins go to those brain cells, they rapidly fire and then they burn out. So it's been shown that MSG and nitrates cause brain rewiring. Hence we said, you know, with the nitrates and the lunch meats, kids get ADD and ADHD because they're going through this brain rewiring, right? So this is why if you're eating a diet high in lunch meats and foods with MSG, spices and things like that, be very cautious because it will affect you neurologically as well, okay, and emotionally. So hot dogs, right? Number one things that we want to get out of our diet. Hot dogs are not a healthy thing. Do you ever think about what hot dogs are made of?
Yeah.
Seriously, they're made of all the parts. They're made of all the extra parts. So I mean, the cow goes to the butcher, a cow or the pig goes to the butcher, they cut the roast, but the hooves, the tongues, the ears, everything, they get ground up and they get spiced and flavored and they get made into these hot dogs. So it's really not a good thing to be putting in your body. And again, if you're thinking about giving your body good fuel, you feel like you have a purpose. You have things to do. You want to have good energy. You want to feel good regularly. You don't want to feel like you're bogged down all the time. We got to start thinking about putting good food in, and the foods that we're eating, even though they taste good, starting to minimize them. White foods. Okay. So does anybody eat white bread still? Good. I'm glad to see. Okay. So anything that's he was afraid to raise his hand, eh? You just threw him under the bus there. You totally gave him away. Oh my goodness. Wow, I was thinking, this is a good group. No, wait a minute, we got one. Okay. No, but here's the thing. So why white bread? Well, white bread is very blanched, right? So if you're going to eat bread, white is not the bread to eat because there's absolutely no nutritional value at all. So they've taken out all the goodness of the wheat, like any goodness of the wheat germ and anything. It's all completely blanched. So all it does is it fills the space, right? White bread breaks down very quickly into sugar. In fact, 2 pieces of white bread are the same amount of sugar on your body as a chocolate bar, right? 2 pieces of white bread, okay? So it's same equivalent, right? And honestly, you can take white bread and put it in this end or put it in the other end, and you get the same benefit out of it. It really doesn't matter. Okay? So yeah, either way. But it bungs everything up. It slows down your digestion. It slows down the absorption of other nutrients because it absorbs a lot of other stuff. And it's like lead. It digests very slowly, and it's not a good thing to have. Hi, sweetheart. Come on in. You want to help me? You can come up front here. Here they come. Hi there. Hi, Amanda. Come on in. Come on in. We got a couple empty chairs here. We got a couple in the second row and one at the back there. There you go. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Oh, there we go. Wonderful. It's a good teamwork here. Fantastic. Okay. All right. So yeah. So white bread, white flour, not a good thing to put in. We want to try to get that out of our diet. So if you do choose to, after tonight, if you do choose to still eat bread or rice or things like that, let's switch to obviously whole grain, or basmati rice or the darker type rices and things like that. Okay. Do you ever wonder why they call it Wonder Bread? Because, we wonder what's in it. Yeah, that's right. That's a good point. I never thought of that one. We wonder what's in it. But we wonder how it can still be fresh after 3 months on the shelf.
That's right.
So, all right. What about grains? So here's a big marketing myth, right? Gluten-free. So whenever something says gluten-free, be very cautious, right? If you truly want to get rid of glutens, if you're trying to get rid of glutens in your diet, you have to get rid of grains. Because once a grain is modified to be quote-unquote gluten-free, and we talk about the marketing myths in our Nutrition 102 seminar, because we'll start looking at reading labels. And it's actually interesting because for a certain food to be considered gluten-free, there's still gluten in it, but it has to be below, the serving size has to be below a certain percentage of gluten. And if it's below a certain percentage of gluten, they can call it gluten-free. So you know what the food companies have done? They've lowered their serving size so small, right? So the percentage now is such a small percentage, then they can call it gluten-free. And it's just kind of a misleading type of thing for the public, okay? So if you really want to be gluten-free, you really got to cut out the grains totally, okay? And they also, when they take gluten out, they replace it by all kinds of stuff that you don't want in your body, like starches. There's white rice, white potato, and corn in some of the food substances, okay? Okay, so aspartame, right? So we talked about aspartame. So name some foods with aspartame in them. Right, Diet Coke. Yeah, so Diet Coke. That's probably the number one, right? Diet Pops, full of aspartame. So how many people have ever died from lack of Diet Pop in their diet? Oh yeah, I have. Okay, so there's some saying right there. Aspartame aspartame is terrible. It's poison. It's absolutely poison. Back in about 2001, the FDA, which is the main governing body for food and health in the United States, it's like Health Canada here, right? They suggested that because of the damaging effects of aspartame, it should be taken off the shelf, right? So there was a kind of a solicitation made to do that. But then they said if you look in the average grocery store, there's over 6,000 products with aspartame in them. It would cause a stock market crash. They said if we did that in the United States, it would bankrupt so many companies. So they decided not to do that and just put out the warnings now. So that would be my suggestion, is switch to natural sweeteners. So then that goes for aspartame, sucralose. So if it's a little pink, blue, or yellow packet, don't use it, okay? Like the Equal or the Sweet and Low or the Sugar Twin, definitely not worth using, okay? So a good alternative would be what? What's a good natural sweetener? Stevia, exactly. We use stevia all the time at home. I use it in my tea, coffee. I use it in my smoothies. So in fact, if you saw that smoothie video, the 30-day challengers, definitely there's a little bit of stevia that goes in those smoothies to sweeten it up. It's a very natural sweetener, comes directly from a plant. There's no chemicals involved in it. Okay, it's very natural, and it doesn't spike the blood sugar. So, all right, so that's a good one to add in. All right, so aspartame is a good thing to get out. Here's a perfect example. So here's a lollipop made with aspartame, right? Sugar-free lollipop. Animals don't even recognize it as food. So ants go right around it. Like if it was made of sugar, ants would be all over it, right? So nature kind of knows. They inherently know. So here's some different sweeteners. So natural sweeteners, if you still want to use natural sweeteners, now keep in mind when you're using natural sweeteners, they still will spike the blood sugar. So in your body, they still will break down and raise your insulin levels, right? So if you're trying to get your insulin levels lower, as we talked about at the beginning, you want to try to minimize these, but this would be a good one to use. So raw organic honey, good sweetener. Natural maple syrup, not the Aunt Jemima stuff. Does anybody use the Aunt Jemima? Okay, so if you look at that, and I'm going to say, go home and look in your cupboard, if you have some in there, it doesn't even say maple syrup because there's no maple syrup in it. It's corn syrup and it's flavored, right? So they're not even allowed to put maple syrup on it because it's just a flavored corn syrup, okay? Coconut sugar is another one too. So those are some natural sweeteners. So this is a really good one. Stevia is a good one. Then there's other good sweeteners too. These are okay. So xylitol, sugar alcohols, like monk fruit sweetener, things like that. Erythritol, maltitol, mannitol, sorbitol. Those are again more natural sweeteners too. And then the ugly ones you want to stay away from, as we mentioned, was aspartame, sucralose, maltodextrin. Do you remember? Anybody remember saccharin?
Yeah.
Do you remember why they took saccharin off the shelf? Back in the 70s, saccharin came out. I remember my dad used to buy saccharin all the time. And why did they take it off the shelf? Because it was actually shown to be causing cancerous tumors, right? So they took it right off the shelf. It's funny, it's the way that health and medicine tends to go, is that the thing that's popular now, 5 or 10 years from now, they look back and they go, wow, that was like thalidomide, right? You remember thalidomide for morning sickness? They give it to pregnant women for morning sickness? And then all of a sudden these babies are born with one arm or fingers coming out of their shoulders and things, deformities. And then, oh, well, we can't be giving thalidomide, So, but back then it was a medical breakthrough, right? So, somebody had a question? Yes?
What about honey?
Okay, yeah, so as I mentioned, like raw organic honey is a good thing to go. Be careful with honey because there's a lot of processed honeys out there, like the Billy Bee honey or whatever it is. Yeah. So some honey bear, yeah. So you have to really, again, best bet would be to go to a local apiary and buy the honey right from the apiary, like right from a beekeeper, right? Because then it's local to the area, which has actually been shown to be good because it helps build immunities to your local area, right? Because typically you live in an environment with pollen and leaves, and if you are eating honey or bee pollen from a local apiary, that is actually an immune system booster, right? So that's a good thing to have too. Okay. Let's see here, white refined sugar. Okay, so we talked about the effect on sugar on your body, so we won't spend too much time on this. But there's all kinds of different forms of sugar. Get sugar in the raw and stuff like that. Still going to spike your blood sugar. The worst is the white refined, like the red path white refined sugar, right? We really want to minimize that in our diet. And then cane sugar or the turbinado or the sugar in the raw kind of thing, they still do spike the blood sugar very, very quickly. Okay. All right, we talked about glycemic index. Does anybody have any questions about glycemic index? We'll talk about that in Nutrition 102 again, but really what it is, it's the rate that your blood sugar spikes after you eat something. So So for instance, like I said earlier, so if you eat a donut, which is very dense in sugar, like let's say a Boston cream donut, right, full of sugar, you eat that, it gets absorbed very quickly, your blood sugar goes, so within 5 or 10 minutes, your blood sugar is through the roof, and that puts tremendous stress in your pancreas, so now it's releasing insulin like crazy to counteract that blood sugar, and then within an hour and a half, 2 things happen. Number 1, you're exhausted, you're doing the head bobs, and within 2 hours, you're hungry again. Like it'll stimulate your body's hunger receptors, and you'll never burn fat. Okay, so we want to stick with foods with lower, smoother glycemic index that digest slower, raise the blood sugar slower, so you have a good abundance of energy over a longer period of time. And what foods, what types of carbohydrates would do that? Vegetables, especially what color vegetables? Green vegetables, exactly. So that's one thing we really want to try to focus on. Okay. All right. Deep fried or fast foods, right? So think about this: the McDonald's French fries, right? I used to love McDonald's French fries as a kid. Anybody with me? Okay. Yeah, I used to love those; they were the best. But McDonald's French fries take the half-life of the damaging effects of McDonald's French fries take 52 days, right? So it's actually been shown that your body is still trying to metabolize the chemicals in the McDonald's French fry after 52 days, and it takes that long for them to get out of your system. So, and we did an experiment a few years ago, and we actually bought a McDonald's cheeseburger and French fries, and we put it in the bag, and we put it on a shelf in a dark room, and just left it there. We had that thing for 2 years. They got hard, right? And it got hard and crispy, not one bit of mold. No mold at all, right? So think about the chemicals in those things that you're putting in your body when mold can't even grow on them, you know? Like even if you made a hamburger from like ground beef, a hamburger, like within a few days, a week maybe, it's going moldy. Like it's, so yeah, that's dangerous stuff, right? So, and then, okay, so here we go, combination foods. And we're going to talk a little bit about combination foods. We're almost done our top 10, so I know you're all getting really depressed here talking about all this stuff. So, combination foods. So, combination foods are examples where we have a food that has a lot of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats together. Okay, so for example, here's our first example is pizza. Okay, so let's break down pizza here. So what's it made of? The crust is made of flour, so it's really high in carbs, right? So, and even if you get a whole wheat crust, still no difference, right? So, so high carbohydrates in the crust, and then what do we have on top of that? So first of all, it's pepperoni, right? So pepperoni's got meat in it, which is going to be some protein, and of course the pepperoni's full of nitrates and spices and things like that, maybe even MSG. And then the cheese is high in fat, right? So we have a high, so pizza's great. I used to love, that was my favorite food when I was growing up, pizza. But if we're eating pizza, and how many people can just eat one slice of pizza? Not many, right? So that's really something that your body takes a long time to digest because carbs and proteins and fats get digested at different rates. 2 systems in your body use the biggest amount of energy. Number 1 is your immune system, and number 2 is your digestion. Not necessarily in that order. Okay, so if you're putting foods like this into your body, your digestive system requires a lot of energy. There's a lot of blood flow that's used to the digestion that has to digest those foods, and they make you exhausted, right? Make you really tired. So, that's obviously something to try to minimize. So if you have a vacation day once a week or something like that, and you want to treat yourself, then that's a great way to do that. We use something called the 3-bite rule, right? So if I go out to a dinner, I go to a friend's place or something, and they want to serve this beautiful big birthday cake, and I have this feeling in my mind that it would be rude of me not to, which is kind of a silly social dysfunction, I think, in my mind, but nonetheless, so I think, okay, well, so I give myself the 3-bite permission. So if it's a piece of birthday cake, I'll have 3 bites, and I push it away. It takes a lot of discipline to do that, but at least then you give a bit of a taste of it, and satisfy that craving, and then push it away. So at least then you're not bombarding your body with that, okay? So what's an example of another really common combination food? What would you think?
Pasta.
Pasta with, if you put what type of sauce on it? Yes, right, exactly. So spaghetti and meatballs, right? Yeah, perfect example. So spaghetti is, the pasta is the carbs, right? High in flour, high in carbs. And then obviously a lot of meat with those meatballs and meat sauce. Okay, that's another one. What else? What type of dessert would be a good example here? Cheesecake, there's another one, yeah, because the crust, you know, you got flour in the crust, and then you got your cheese, which is full of fat, and there's obviously lots of sugar in there, right? How about ice cream, right? Ice cream, so there, the cream is full of fat, right? Tons of sugar and flavorings in ice cream, right? And then, of course, if you put it in a cone, there's carbs there, and, you know, so, yeah, so there's hamburger, there's another example, okay? Big bun, right? Full of full of carbohydrates, and then you got your beef patty, and sometimes it's a big, thick, you know, quarter-pound beef patty. And then if we put cheese on it, or some people put bacon on it, stuff like that, it's a combination food. You know, a lot of times you go and you have a big burger like that, or let's say a, you know, steak and mashed potatoes, you know, combination meals. I mean, afterwards, don't you feel gross? Like you're so full, and it's like lead in your stomach, and it takes a good couple of days for that to digest, right? So, okay. So how to change? So we're going to start talking about things to do, and like I said earlier, without depriving yourself. So obviously we want to recognize bad foods that we're eating, but let's start talking about how we can start putting in some good foods. Okay? All right. Any questions so far? Everybody good? Need to take a break or anything?
Well, just a minute. We were always brought up with meat, potatoes, and a vegetable.
Right.
And then you have your bread.
Right.
So that's a mix of all those things. So you didn't teach us to eat just vegetables.
Okay, so that's a great point. I don't want you to recreate the wheel. We're going to try it. So here's the thing. So people want change in their life, right? So either we want to lose weight, we want to feel more energy, we want to maybe counter it. Maybe if we're not mentally feeling the best, you know, maybe we're feeling a little down or depressed or whatnot. Maybe we're taking medication that we shouldn't be, right? So you bring up a good point, because you know we grew up, and I'm in the same boat. We grew up meat, potatoes, bread. My mom, she would make meals like that every single night. But look at our society now, who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? We're the highest medicated society on the face of the earth, right? It's actually been shown. Health Canada says that the average person over the age of 70 takes 11 different prescriptions, right? Well, I know 70-year-olds that are not taking any, so I know there's some that are taking more than 11, right? To bring up that average, okay? So there's a lot of conditions now that, if you look at our seniors, that weren't prevalent when we were younger. Would you agree with that, right? So it's more common. So maybe there's things that we've done growing up that have, you know, created some of the problems that we're having now in our senior years. So we want to let's try to be really focused on, and this is again, recent science in the last 20, 25 years has really identified nutrition as being the root cause of a lot of conditions and diseases, right? So now we can say, okay, well, let's start making some modifications here or there so that we can have a more fruitful life and be better, and not necessarily be in a nursing home by the time we're 80 years old, right? So that's kind of the way I think about things. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah. So without deprivation, okay? So obviously, number one, get more greens, right? We said that earlier. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to put more greens into your diet. I try to do this every day. So every day, I always start my day with a protein smoothie. And you ask anybody that knows me, every single day I go out of my way to make that protein smoothie. If I'm here in the office, we have a blender here, I bring all my ingredients in, and I always put greens in that smoothie. Now sometimes it's greens like, you know, spinach or kale or something like that, and sometimes it might just be powdered greens. Okay, so if some of us are not, if we know we just don't like vegetables, we're not getting enough greens, we can supplement. There's good supplements to put in. So I use veggie greens, and I know we talk about that in here coming up in this talk, but nonetheless, that's something to do. So there's ways to make it easy on yourself, so you're not going out to the grocery store 2 or 3 times a week buying broccoli and cucumbers and things like that if you don't want to do that, right? So here's a list of green fruits and vegetables that are really good to start putting into your diet. So we start up here with kale. It's very anti-inflammatory. Broccoli helps lower cholesterol. There's artichokes, green beans, asparagus, cabbages, limes, avocados, okra, cucumber, celery, Brussels sprouts, arugula, and cabbage. So anything along those lines, great for you, right? So if you did nothing else but started to add more greens in your diet, you're that much further ahead. Okay? Go ahead.
Such a big list.
Yeah, it is a big list, yeah. Okay.
Well, what does okra taste like?
Okra, yeah, okra. Like a green leafy vegetable, like, you know. How do you describe it?
It has its own taste. I don't know. It has a slimy taste sometimes, but it tastes good.
Yeah.
It's not a
typically I eat a lot of Brussels sprouts and all kinds of green lettuces and kale and stuff, spinach. Okay, so and like I mentioned earlier, that's one of the reasons why we carry the veggie greens here, and for that exact reason. So I have, like I said, I have a scoop of veggie greens every day. I add it in my protein smoothie. There's different flavors. It's actually very tasty. You can do, I mean, you can have a glass of water, put a scoop of veggie greens in, get your green supplement for the day, or you can put it into a fruit smoothie or a protein smoothie, juicing, whatever the case is, and add it all in there. This is full of nutrients. If you just did this without taking any vitamins, you just had a scoop of this in water, you would watch your color of your urine change. Seriously. And that's a great indication to say that is my body absorbing some nutrients? Because the more vitamin, you ever taken multivitamins, and then you go to the bathroom a couple hours later and you look down, whoa, what's that? It's golden. Holy smoke. But that's a sign that obviously your body's absorbing these nutrients. It's going to use what it needs at a time, and then the rest is going to get flushed through your kidneys and out into your urine. But you'll see that with this, because it's full of nutrients. Okay?
Why is it good for non-vegetarians? If it's greens, why
Perfect way to get vegetable nutrients. Oh, for non-vegetarians. So in other words, for people that don't like vegetables. That was kind of my intention of writing that way.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you. Yeah. So that was my intention, is that for those of us who don't like vegetables, like my kids, right? So my boys are very carnivorous, right? I think a lot of teenage boys are. They love their burgers and sausages and meat and of course pizza and stuff like that. And as much as we try to get them to eat well, it's more about adding good stuff. So every day that I'm home with them and I make a protein smoothie, I'll make enough that we've got a scoop of greens in there, and then they get their glass and they get their little bit of greens for the day. So so that was what my intention was there. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about fats. Okay. So fats, most of the time fats come from animal products. Like I said, there are fats from vegetable products, but let's talk about the animal products first of all. Okay. So typically in this day and age, the way that the farming has gone, it's gone very commercialized, right? So it seems that farms are becoming fewer and fewer, but the ones that stay around are getting bigger and bigger. So they're producing, a lot more chickens or beef or pork or whatnot. We have a chicken farmer that comes in, actually, well, a few actually that I've known over the years, because I live in Mount Pleasant. And it was actually a friend of mine, Keith, that took me through his chicken barn years ago and showed me the workings of it. They just built it. And he went in, they had 2 levels of this chicken barn, and there's 20,000 chicks on each level. 20,000, right? And they sold to Swiss Chalet and KFC. But here's the thing that really kind of struck me. He said, well, he goes, this is such a science. He said, we have timers on the lights, and the lights come on every 2 hours, because every time the lights come on, it tells the chickens to eat. So we time it for so much, and they eat for so long, and then we turn the lights off. And then a couple hours later, the lights come back on. They eat again. So within those 6 weeks, they can scientifically predict exactly what weight to the ounce those chickens are going to grow, right? Because if you go to Swiss Chalet or go through the grocery store and see those chickens on the shelf, or you buy those pre-cooked chickens, they're all the same size. That is scientifically done. That's no accident, right? And he goes, oh. And I said, so you start with 40,000 chicks. I said, what? How many of them survive? He goes, well, there's probably a few hundred that get killed off out of all that. But he goes, the food we give them now is so good for them. He goes, it's full of antibiotics. Got your steroids in there so they grow, the growth hormone. Oh yeah, I was like, he was talking like this is a good thing, right? So that hit home so much for me. I thought this is such a, this is like man-made food here, right? So I thought, well, I'm going to minimize the use of chicken. So what happens though in that whole situation, the same goes with beef, is that it destroys the natural fat ratios in the food, right? So if you think about it, back years ago, that's so embarrassing. I told him not to call me. That's okay, no problem. All right, so if you think about it, years ago, when farmers raised cows, right, they were. Okay. So when farmers raised cows years ago, they would let them out of the barn, and where would they go? Out to pasture. And they would graze on the grass. So cows that graze on grass, or animals that eat naturally, like free-range chickens, build natural fat ratios, which when we then digest those animals, we get better fat ratios. But now it's not like that. They're very, you know, so what are cows fed most of the time now? They're fed with grain or corn, right? Grain or corn, which completely destroys their fat ratio. So if you're going through the supermarket and you see beef, like if say you're buying some beef, steaks or whatnot, and it says corn-fed beef, don't buy it. It's terrible, terrible fat ratios for you, okay? So, you know, ideally we want to switch to grass-fed beef because it's got a better fat ratio. And what do we mean by fat ratios? Well, there's two types of fats that really have a big play on our body, okay? There's omega-6 fats and omega-3 fats, okay? Omega-6 are very readily available. A lot of foods that we eat normally full of omega-6 fats, that's not an issue. Omega-3, on the other hand, we really got to work to get omega-3s in, especially the way that food is manufactured now, okay? So supplementing with omega-3 is very important, right? And I would suggest for everybody, it's not a bad idea to start taking omega-3 supplements to get more omega-3 in your diet. It's good for your heart, it's good for your blood cells, it's good for your skin cells, good for your nervous system, good for your brain, okay? It's got great effects for just building the body with healthy cells, okay? So that's one of the reasons why we say, well, we want to switch to more grass-fed natural proteins, right? So that's why I say, like, do we eat grass-fed beef all the time? Absolutely not. I mean, first of all, it's not easy to get, right? You got to go to a farm. So there's a few farms around Brantford. You can go and order. We've ordered half a cow before, so we have some in the freezer. So not all the time, but we try to minimize the amount of grain-fed beef that we eat, or even free. You know, instead of buying free-range chickens, the other types of chickens, we don't buy those typically too often. We don't go to LA that often. We certainly don't go to KFC. Okay. So just again, things to be aware of and things to think about. Now, portion size. So, and we talk about in different stages of life, because my boys, their idea of portion size and my idea of portion size are two different things. Okay. Rule of thumb for a healthy adult, male or female, if you're trying to keep your portions consistent, for protein per meal, we want about roughly 20 to 30 grams most, okay, 20 to 30 grams per meal, and that would be about the size of your palm without the fingers. So if you take the size of your palm without the fingers, so if you had a piece of chicken, piece of beef, piece of steak, don't let it exceed the size of your palm, right? Piece of salmon, whatever the case. So that's what we would suggest. So here's some examples of good proteins. We have beef, fish, chicken, eggs or egg whites, great sources of protein, turkey. Natural peanut butter is a good source of protein. Almonds or almond butter, and tree nuts. That's a good vegetable source of protein. What do you mean? So give me some examples of tree nuts. Walnuts, yeah. What else? Pecans, almonds, yeah, exactly. So those are good tree nuts. Why? What are peanuts now? They're right. They grow in the ground. Exactly. So they grow in the ground. So that's a little different. Now, peanuts can give you a good source of protein, like it's on here, right? So if you're going to buy peanut butter, my suggestion would be switch to natural peanut butter, because the Kraft or the Jif peanut butter, you know, with the sugar in it, very high in sugar, very, very high in sugar. What's the thing about natural peanut butter? What's the instant? Yeah, it's the oil. It comes to the top, right? It does. So that's a good sign. If it comes to the top, you got to keep it in the fridge, right? You obviously stir it up, keep it in the fridge. And here's a tip: turn it upside down, right? Because the oil will go down to the bottom, and then when you turn it over, then you're getting the peanut butter, right? You don't have to stir it up as much. It's just a little.
Do you not want that oil?
Yeah, well, it's just easier if you don't have to sift the oil or you know.
Well, yeah, I remember stirring it like
right,
before.
stir it all. Yeah, and that way you just don't have to stir it as much.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. But if you do keep it in the fridge, which you should, it'll get a little firmer. It's a little harder. It's not quite as mushy when you use it, right? So that's a good switch. If you're going to use peanut butter, that's a good switch to use. But my suggestion would be even switch to almond butter or like cashew butter, things like that. They're even a little better for you. They're not inexpensive though. That's the only thing. Okay. Okay, any questions about that? One thing about eggs, I love eggs. I would say use free-range eggs. A lot of people are concerned about eggs because of the cholesterol. Has anybody heard that before? Cholesterol in eggs? Okay, so, and again, we're going to talk about that at our dinner, right? But it's not a bad, I would eat eggs every day, right? It's the oxidation of cholesterol that becomes a bad thing, and that's when people have a diet high in carbohydrates along with foods that they're eating cholesterol-wise. That causes oxidation of cholesterol, and then it becomes bad, right? But if you keep your sugars low, you can eat as much cholesterol as you want, and it's actually good for you. Eggs are actually full of vitamins and minerals, right? So the egg yolk, full of vitamins, and the whites are very high in protein, right? Okay, very good.
What kind of eggs are you supposed to have
Sorry.
again? What kind of eggs did you say?
I would say free range. Yeah, you can get free range or omega-3 eggs. They're the best way to go. Yeah, and if you have the opportunity, just get them from a farm where the chickens are just allowed to kind of run around, and you just get the They have layers and you just get the eggs. That's fantastic. Okay, whey protein, right? So we talk about whey protein. I would say my suggestion would be that the benefits of whey have been shown scientifically for many, many years now. It's a great supplement to be putting into your diet. It's one of the first things we always talk about putting into your diet. So whenever I do a nutritional consultation, that's one of the first things I would suggest adding, right? So instead of depriving, add something of so greens and whey protein into your diet, and again, you'll start replacing other foods. So, does anybody know where whey comes from? Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. So whey. I learned this. I used to work in a dairy. When I was going through university, I worked in a place called Malcolm Food Specialties in St. George. I used to be there. Yeah, remember that? So I worked with Jamie Malcolm, actually. He was a good friend of mine. Passed away now. But we worked together there. And I learned a lot about the whole milk production industry then. And back then, what happened was they would take the milk and they used to make cream cheese there. So they would separate the milk and the cream, right? And when they made the cheese, the cream cheese slurry, like the slurry, they would add a bacterial culture to it, to the cream and the milk, concoction. And the byproduct of the cheese making, when the bacteria fermented the milk and the cheese, would be curds, which would be the cheese, and whey, right? You remember your nursery rhyme, right? Yeah, curds and whey. So that's where it came from. So whey, and what they would do back then is they would actually take the whey and sell it to the farmers, because the farmers would use it to feed their pigs and cows and things like that, right? And then the whole whey health industry came about and said, well, this is great protein for humans. And the science behind it now is actually showing it has a lot of good health qualities. Helps lower cholesterol, lowers blood pressure, has anti-cancer agents in it. It's really good for muscle building, for women with osteoporosis, bone building. So it's a really good thing to be putting into your diet. Now, here's the thing with whey, is that if you're going to start using whey, you really got to be cautious on what type of whey that you buy. You can go to Walmart and spend $20 on a huge container of whey, right? And then you go, oh, this is really inexpensive over here at Walmart. But it's usually made offshore. It's full of very artificial sweeteners like aspartame or sucralose or ace-sulfate potassium, right? Kind of bad stuff. And it might be, so it's sweetened with that stuff. And it might not be from grass-fed cows. It might be from farm-raised cows, right? So if you want to buy good whey, look for grass-fed whey, right? So it comes from grass-fed cows. New Zealand is huge in the production of whey because they have a lot of organic farms in New Zealand, thousands of acre farms, and they make a lot of grass-fed whey, and it should be sweetened with stevia, okay? You'll pay a little more for that type of whey, but the benefits are well worth the extra few bucks, right? So I use, the whey that we sell here is Nature Pro whey, all right? It's made from grass-fed cows in New Zealand. We actually ship it in from Winnipeg, and it's about, I think we charge $60 for a bottle of it. Mine will last me at least a month, right? So, so it's relatively inexpensive, and that's my protein every single day. I'll have a scoop of that whey in my protein smoothie with my veggie greens, okay? I use almond milk.
What about whey that you can buy at the milk barn? This whey.
That's good. I would love to know what's in it. So if it's just in the big container, right, and you just fill up your bag with whey, yeah, I would love to know that, like if they had an ingredient list. Yeah, yeah, then at least you know what you're buying, right? So at least then, like when you buy something that's, you can look at the label and say, okay, I know what's going in me. That would be worthwhile. But if they give you a list of ingredients and say, oh yeah, this is what we sell.
I'm confused a little bit because milk and dairy are not really good for you in ways of byproduct.
Great, I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, yes. So great question. So did you hear the question? So Sandy said, we talked earlier about milk being not good for you, right? But whey, on the other hand, is actually very good for you. Great question. Because when the bacterial culture goes in the cheese, it separates the curd, so it takes a lot of those bad milk proteins out and they go into the cheese. Whey is left with a better, easily digestible protein, right? So whey is actually very easily digestible. It's actually got benefits for your digestive system too. So it's completely different than just drinking milk. Now, if somebody is, totally against drinking milk, you want to become total vegan or total vegetarian, there are also vegetarian types of proteins, right? We actually sell a vegan protein downstairs too, for that reason, that are made from vegetables, like rice protein, hemp, and things like that, which are, again, beneficial for you as well. Okay? All right, great question. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so, yeah. benefits there. So losing weight, anti-cancer properties, lowers cholesterol, asthma, it's good for people with asthma, and lowering blood pressure and diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Okay. Okay. Sorry? Okay. So yeah, that's our Nature Pro there. It comes in vanilla and it comes in chocolate. And I would suggest if you haven't tried that yet, just try it. It's really good. You can mix it with water. It's actually not bad with water, but I prefer mixing it with like unsweetened almond milk. I throw a quarter of an avocado in there, and sometimes some kale or some blueberries. You know, if you like vanilla and blueberries, that's a nice combination too. You make it
Different than
tasty.
what you had about 3 years ago.
Just a different label. Yeah, we used to have Max Living Protein,
Yeah.
but we had to get that. So it's funny because Max Living Protein contacted Nature Pro, Initech, the company that makes Nature Pro in Winnipeg, to relabel their product for Max Living. They shipped it down to the States, and then we were buying it from the States and shipping it back up here. By the time it got here, like, the price of it was ridiculous because we had to pay duty on it. It was a Canadian product that was shipped down there, but then we had to pay duty on it. So we just started shipping it right from Winnipeg. It's a lot more cost effective. Yeah. So here's some other healthy fats. So you guys tell me, what are some other good healthy fats that we should be putting in? Olive oil, exactly. Okay, so I'm kind of giving it away here, but all right. What's that? Avocados, right? Avocados, great healthy fat. You know, I would suggest eat as much avocado as you possibly can. I eat a quarter a day in my protein smoothies every single day. Salmon is full of good omega-3 fats, right? I try to eat salmon at least once a week. Okay. Free-range eggs, good fats in the yolks. You have grass-fed beef. There's nuts and seeds and things like that. So, okay, lots of good healthy fats. So, what's that? That's a good question. Does look like yeah, you know what? I bet it's coconut because that really coconut would be on that list too. Yeah, good point. I never really kind of looked at that closely. All right, so here's the thing with we said earlier that the low-fat craze, you know, went on years ago. But low-fat diets make you fat because they're typically high in carbs, right? So high-fat diets consisting of foods such as nuts, olive oil, coconut oil, fatty fish, eggs, and avocados, they have all kinds of benefits. So there's a diet now that's very popular for reversing disease, especially for cancer patients, right? Which is called the keto diet. Have anybody heard of the keto diet? So keto diet or ketogenic diet is a very highly fat inclusive diet, right? So basically it's all fat. So a person's eating like basically a lot of these foods constantly. There's no, like it's completely limited of carbs, no fruit, no breads, nothing with sugar. Like it's totally deprived of sugar. But the benefits on your body are huge because, here's the thing, what it does is it resets your hormonal balance, right? And this is the cool thing about nutrition. See, we're created very adaptable to our environment. Our bodies can adapt to different environments. So if we move to a different climate, eventually our bodies will adapt. And here's an example. Let's say we moved up into the mountains, right, where the oxygen level is lower. Okay? What happens to the number of red blood cells over time? They increase because red blood cells carry oxygen, so your body's ability to uptake oxygen needs to be greater, so the body adapts and produces more red blood cells, so you can adapt better in that higher environment. So if you eat a diet that's very, high in carbs, your body will start producing a certain level of hormones, right? But let's say you change your diet completely and go to a ketogenic diet, which is high in fats. Over time, your body totally resets its hormone balance. And when that happens, your health completely changes. Mentally, physically, your digestion, your immune system, everything. So that's one of the reasons why we do a lot of the nutritional coaching we do with that intention. So this 30-day challenge that we're doing, the goal of that is to say, let's reset your hormones, right? And in doing that, a great side effect is you lose weight, but more importantly, you start feeling more energy, you might start sleeping better, you might emotionally feel a little more positive or a little more lively with things, and that's the great thing about changing your nutrition, because it's adapting your body's ability to function, right? So that's the good thing about a diet higher in fat. A lot of these great things happen. So you start to lower your blood sugar, improve your blood lipids, right, your triglycerides. It aids absorption of vitamins, especially the fat-soluble vitamins. What are the fat-soluble vitamins? Anybody know? You remember. DEEK. D, E, A, and K. Okay, 4 fat soluble vitamins. So you need fats to absorb those fat soluble vitamins. Increases metabolism, decrease your insulin resistance, increases your good cholesterol, decreases inflammation, better for your cardiovascular health, and improves organ health, and improves weight loss. Right, so you actually start losing weight. Yeah, really.
Just one problem I have with that weight loss thing is that these items, although I know they're good for you, are extremely high in calories.
Yes, right. So that's a great point, right? And I'm glad somebody brought this up. So let's say, okay, we have a great slide when we do a nutrition talk. So you could take a Twinkie, right, which a package of Twinkies, right, or we all know what Twinkies are, that has 180 calories, and you could take a cup of almonds that also has 180 calories, and what's better for you, right? So you bring up a great point, right? So we got to stop looking so much at caloric intake, right? Because and we'll talk about portion sizes in just a second, because that is important, especially if you're trying to lose weight. I mean, you could be eating all good foods, but if you're eating 10,000 calories a day of good food, you're not going to lose weight. Your body's going to suffer. But so that's a good point. But we got to be putting the calorically dense foods in there, right? That will suppress your appetite, keep you feeling satisfied, and give you good high nutrient consumption, right? Excellent point. Okay. All right. Okay. Any other questions? Making sense? How are we all doing? You okay? Is this good stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good so far? Okay, good. All right. Okay. So here's some examples of bad fats, right? So these are fats we want to start maybe getting out of our diet. Number one, I would say, is hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oils. Okay, so that means the bad oils that we use, vegetable oils. So cottonseed oil, soybean, vegetable oils, whether they say autolyzed or hydrolyzed. So how many people still use like canola oil or safflower oil, stuff like that? If you do, get rid of it. It's terrible. It goes rancid. It doesn't last very long. It's bad for you. It creates trans fats in your bodies, which are carcinogenic, right? So it's really not good for building good health. The oils that you want to switch to are coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil, okay? Grapeseed oil is a good one, right? Or even avocado oil is not a bad one too, okay? The best ones to cook, sorry?
You said that for avocado, it's good.
I said it's not a bad one.
Oh,
Yeah,
not a
yeah,
bad,
yeah.
okay.
Avocado's not a bad one either. Yeah. So yeah, but anything beyond that, so like canola, safflower, peanut oil, sesame oil, they're not good, right? So those are the 4. So avocado, coconut, olive, and grapeseed. They're the ones. So the ones to cook with typically would be olive or coconut, because they are more stable under heat. If you cook to the point where, let's say you put some oil in a frying pan and it starts to smoke, I don't care what oil it is, don't use it, right? So if we're cooking with oil, you want to keep it at medium heat at best, right? So don't get it so hot that it's really sizzling or smoking, okay? That's not a good thing, because that denatures the oil and it's not good for you. So trans fats, the second one, trans fats. So margarine, if you're still using margarine, even if it's deceptively healthy, right? So you look at some of the base cell and it's got a little heart health on it, supported by the Canadian Heart Association, they have all the, or it's got olive oil, it's the olive oil margarine. It's, again, don't be fooled by the marketing ploys, okay? So it's not good for you, right? That's not a good thing to be putting in. Rancid vegetable oil, so corn oil, canola. You know what, canola's not even a real oil. You know what it is? It's
Not corn?
Canadian oil linoleic acid. I think there's like a mnemonic for canola, but it's a manufactured type of oil. Not corn oil. No, not corn. Corn oil's not a good one. Okay. Found in practically every. Oh, and this is the thing. So a lot of these oils, the bad oils, are found in packaged foods. So breads, crackers, cookies, boxed food. If you look at the ingredients, you'll see hydrogenated or canola oil, cottonseed oil, soybean oil, that type of thing, right? So that pretty much tells you it's good to start not putting a lot of boxed foods and packaged foods into your diet. They're very manufactured. Okay? Fats in grain-fed meat. So, and again, this turns the meat very acidic because it's from grain-fed or corn-fed cows. Okay? Not good for you. And what disease flourishes in an acidic environment? Yes, exactly. That's right. So we want to try to alkalize our body. And how do we alkalize our body? What's the best way? By eating a lot of vegetables. What color?
Green.
Oh, yes, you guys are brilliant. That's awesome. Good. Hey, good. What a group. All right, so we want to start changing bad fats to good fats. So get away from the vegetable oils into the more healthy, stable coconut oil. Here's a good thing about coconut oil. You want to look for extra virgin coconut oil. Now there's a difference because there's, I forget what they describe it as. There's another type of coconut oil which is not extra virgin. So if it's not called extra virgin, you open it and it doesn't have the coconut scent, right? It's like a white oil. It looks like coconut oil, but it doesn't have the coconut scent. Extra virgin does have the coconut scent, so it has a coconut taste, but it's much better for you. Okay, less processed. All right, margarine, butter, right? Isn't that neat?
Yeah.
So again, like that lollipop earlier, they don't even recognize this as food, you know. So yeah, look at, I think you're right. One died. You probably had a stroke.
Drowned it.
Okay, so again, omega. So we want to add more omega-3. So how do we do that? Well, foods high in omega-3 fats. So let's list off some foods high in omega-3 fats again. We said so salmon. Yeah. What else? Almonds. Yeah. So free-range eggs. Yeah, sure. What else? Avocados. Yeah. Yeah. Pardon me. Big Mac. Is that what you said? Big Mac. Okay. All right. You can justify anything if you want to. Really.
He's your student.
So these are our benefits. So by adding these foods in, we start creating benefits. So we have, first of all, we start losing weight because it again resets our hormones. So your body starts secreting more leptin, that burns more fat, right? Because you're decreasing your carbs, putting more fat in, you're going to start burning fat. It sounds totally contradictory to the way we were brought up, right?
Yeah.
Right? But it works beautifully. And I can tell you from first-hand experience, it works beautifully. Okay, lowers triglycerides, lowers rheumatoid arthritis because inflammation goes down, right? So you're less inflamed, so your joints feel better, your hands, your wrists, your knees, your hips, everything, lower back. It lowers the incidence of strokes. It lessens the potential for an acute heart attack, right? Decreases cancer. There's psychiatric benefits, so people that have depression or bipolar dysfunction, you know, some sort of disorders or things like that, conditions. But the good thing about that is you increase your fish breath. A lot of salmon, fish oil. So best omega-3 sources, we talked a few about some of these already. So flax and chia seeds, so seeds, nuts, we talked about that. Fish like salmon, tilapia, mahi-mahi, spinach, broccoli, these are all good sources. Squash, right, there's one that we haven't talked about. Lettuce and avocados, broccoli, seaweed, Brussels sprouts, so green leafy vegetables are pretty safe. Okay.
So a lot of things out with the seaweed anymore.
I'm sorry?
Could we talk about seaweed? Yeah.
Like kelp and things like that? Yeah. I'll be honest, yeah, I don't eat a lot of that. There is a lot of trend to that, yeah, I don't eat a lot of that. I like to stick with, you know, I just love broccoli. I don't know what it is. Broccoli, spinach, kale, those are the greens in my veggie greens. You know? So, all right, so how to get started. So, you know, if you're still a little confused or you don't really know where to get started, we can help you out with that. So first of all, we do, for those of you on the 30-day challenge, part of the 30-day challenge, and so we will have another one. For those of you who didn't do it, the 30-day challenge, we started it the first week of January. You paid $20, right? $20, and you get a nutritional consultation with us. So you get a package, right? You get your diet diary, and you fill out your diet diary, and then everybody that fills out their diet diary gets to come in and have a nutritional consultation with us. We'll actually go through your diet diary with you and make specific customized points and say, okay, let's take this out, let's add this. You know, talk about your supplements and vitamins or medications you're taking. How's that affecting you? We talk about eating foods at different times of the day. So here's a good question for you. Let's say you want to have a bowl of cereal, okay? And I would encourage you not to have a bowl of cereal because it's so high in carbs, it breaks down to a lot of sugar. But let's say you want to have a bowl of cereal. What would be the worst time of the day to have a bowl of cereal? Nighttime. Why? Why would it be like that? Right, because it breaks down to sugar, and then you go to bed, and that sugar it totally disrupts your sleep patterns, your hormone levels, it'll throw your sleeping off, and it'll just turn to fat, okay? So if we're going to have something that's high in carbohydrates, like bread or cereal, when would be the best time to have that? First thing in the morning, because then we have time to burn it off through the day, right? So if we start thinking that way, so then at dinner, let's say our last meal of the day, which ideally, in a perfect world, should be 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed, right? Because you want to give your body time to fast, right? And a good fast would typically be 10 to 12 hours at at least, right? We're designed to eat through daylight hours. Okay, so think about that. We're designed, chickens, perfect example. We talked about the chickens, the lights, right, going on and off. They eat during the day. Innately, they know to eat. So humans, same thing. So at nighttime, we eat our last meal. Should be 2 to 3 hours. But what type of food should we eat in the evening? What would digest? Right, so the proteins or vegetables, which would spike the blood sugar a lot less. So it's a lot less stress on our body when we sleep. It wouldn't affect the hormones so much. It wouldn't affect your serotonin, your sleep patterns. You'd sleep better. That type of thing. Okay. So if you want to get started, here's the way to get started. So first of all, yeah. So
Question
yeah.
about cereal. So when new parents, a lot of them are taught to fill their babies up at night
Right.
with infant cereal.
Right.
So they'll sleep longer.
Right.
So they think,
Right.
are those full of sugars too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. So breastfeeding, obviously, for infants is good. And now it's actually been shown, again, scientifically, that breastfeeding should happen for at least 8 months to a year, right, ideally. And typically we start supplementing with children about 5 to 6 months with some solids. But the first solid to put in, like if they're putting in cereal, would be rice cereal, because it's got maybe a lesser glycemic index than some of the other cereals, right? And then go to vegetables, right? So adding too much cereal to a child creates a lot of problems digestively. First of all, they get constipated, they can get colicky, and then they can start having immune system reactions like infections, like ear infections and things like that. And that can be, again, totally related to nutrition, okay? So, yeah, great question. There's this, you know, we can get so deep into this nutritional stuff, and there's so much that it can be related to and we can talk about, but it's actually, a lot of it now is so scientifically based, but it's all got to do with the way your body adapts to the food you're putting in. So again, if we can start thinking about what the food we're putting in is creating an effect and a side effect in your body. And if you're not happy with the way your health is right now, we can change it nutritionally in a big, big way. Okay. So again, I was talking about the 30-day challenge. So the 30-day challenge to get the customized nutritional program. We do our weigh-ins on a Tanita scale, so it measures weight and body fat, and we monitor that over the 30 days. So they get a weigh-in in the middle, weigh-in at the end. We have some pretty cool prizes at the end of it, which we're going to be giving out at our heart health dinner. So if you didn't get involved in that, look for the next one. But for those of you who still want some help or some accountability and some guidance, we do nutritional consultations, right? Which largely is included in everything that we talked about with the 30-day challenge. We charge $59 for that. If you want to do that, just sign up at the desk. We'll walk you through that. You get a package, and we'll show you exactly how to make the changes you need to make. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, if you want to get some of the stuff we talked about tonight, we do have it available downstairs. We always give a little discount for those of you who wanted to come out tonight. So we have our Nature Pro, we have Veggie Greens, and this is a great book because it has all the nutritional plans and diets, I hate to use the word diet, but diets that we talk about. It's called Align Your Health, and it has a grocery shopping list in there. It's got all the information you need to know. It's got some neat recipes in there that coincide with the nutritional plans too, really delicious stuff, even dessert recipes that are very low glycemic dessert recipes or no carb, and so that's available downstairs too. But the Nature Pro and the Veggie Greens, we take $5 off tonight if you want to get those. There's no tax on them, okay? So we're lucky enough as a chiropractic office, we don't have to charge tax. So the price that you see on there is the price that you pay minus just tonight, $5, okay? All right? And I think that is it. Do I have another slide there? No, that's it, okay. So any questions? Does that make sense? Good. Okay, so, yeah, sure.
So thinking about cheese, my most favorite thing in the world, like when you're talking about the breakdown of the human protein and the cow's protein,
Yeah.
if it's cheese in some form, has it therefore not been processed as much and still has some of the goodness at least, or is there anything?
Okay, great question.
Because you kind of focus on milk more.
Yeah, so cheese, yeah, absolutely, cheese is not the best thing. So cheese is high in fat, and it is also high in protein. You have milk protein and your fat in there, but it is tough for your body to digest that combination. So cheese typically sits like lead in your stomach. It takes a lot of energy to digest cheese, and it will slow down your peristalsis. So in other words, it slows down your body's ability to get it out, right? So typically it's very constipated, right? Okay, so you don't want to eat too much of it, right? So here's the thing. So let me just say, if you want to eat cheese, look for raw cheese, right? Vegan cheese is a good one to eat, right? Because it doesn't have the dairy in it. So there's or goat's cheese because it's got a different level of fat and protein in it, which is a little easier to digest, right? Goat's milk, same thing for goat's milk. If you want to drink milk, Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. So that's, yeah, because goat's milk protein is a lot smaller than a dairy milk protein, so it is much easier to digest. Okay. All right. Not sure I know what that is.
It, what about
You're breaking things down, your lactose, reduced milk,
Right.
and then you have your fine filtered
Right.
milks. And it's supposed to be something which
So good question. So my first thought on that would be to say, okay, that so fine filtered. So the question was, Jan said, what is fine filtered milk? And then there's the lactose intolerant milk, right? And then there's the fine filtered milk. They're still very manufactured, right? So there's still a lot of manufacturing that goes into that. A lot of sort of synthesis that goes into that. So it's not a natural food for your body. Your body doesn't recognize it as something natural, right? No. Okay, that would be my best answer on that one. But
It's just that I know
Yeah.
as it tolerates it much better
Then
than
regular.
regular.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
What about yogurt?
So, okay, so question is, what about yogurt? So again, yogurt's a fermented dairy beverage, right? So Greek yogurt would not be a bad choice because it's made typically with goat milk, right? And it's not sweetened, and it doesn't have that big fruit puree on the bottom, right? But the other yogurts that are dairy flavored yogurt, full of sugar, they got the fruit yogurt on the bottom, like you might as well eat a chocolate bar, like really, because it's really not good for you. So Greek yogurt, on the other hand, is good for you. It does have some good bacterial properties. Will help your gut digest and build proper bacteria, like probiotics will. Sort of same line. Okay. All right.
So what about oats? Like you can
Okay.
oatmeal.
All right. So yeah, great question.
Because it combines
Okay.
with cholesterol.
So if you're going to have grains, oats are not a bad grain to have, but keep in mind they will spike your blood sugar. So if you're trying to make hormonal changes, trying to reboot your hormones, get them right out altogether, right? But if you're going to eat oats, you can't eat the ones where you rip the package open and pour hot water on it, right?
No, it's still like steel cup.
So it has to be the steel cup where you got to cook them for 15 minutes, right? And then, yeah. So, but be careful again, because what happens? You get a bowl of oatmeal, and what do? We add brown sugar and raisins and milk.
Add
And stuff.
nuts.
So okay, so nuts would be good, yeah. Right, but for most people, so you got to think about things like that. But so my suggestion would be, if you're really trying to make some positive changes, get rid of the carbs, and the more you get rid of the, like I love oatmeal, and so once in a while, if I'm out at a buffet or something, in fact on the weekend I got to speak at a seminar, and they had this beautiful buffet out there, and of course I had all my expenses paid, so oh man, it was $39 for the breakfast buffet on the weekend, yeah, at the Renaissance Hotel down at SeaWorld, right? So it's like a high-end hotel. They had everything. They had smoked salmon. They had everything. It's beautiful. Kid in a candy store. So I had a little bowl of oatmeal there, but you know. It was my vacation, right? But so anyway, but so I would say, if you're really trying to make change, reboot your hormones, cut the grains out altogether. Okay? Okay? Yes.
What do you think of cheese, like the cheese bars, like say Kraft or whatever, but it's low fat, or like the cholesterol is lower, light? Like, does that help?
Yeah. Honestly, don't.
No.
Yeah. 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 There's so. That's why I mentioned earlier, Nutrition 102. We're going to show you some labels that are completely deceptive because they're big marketing myths. So if you see like low-fat cheeses and that are
Lower
perceived as
cholesterol.
low cholesterol, there's such a
Because some say like the lowest is 15, say it's mozzarella, and then there's some that are 30 cholesterol. So then I buy the one that's 15 cholesterol, thinking I'm okay.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But it's not.
No, it's really not. Yeah, yeah. The more, and kind of the rule of thumb, the more natural the better. So if it's something that's made in a factory and wrapped in a wrapper and a package, it's probably, I put it at the back of the choices, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think of the New Canada Food Guide? It's pretty much what we're talking about.
I haven't seen the new Canada Food Guide, but it really did need some alterations and some change because it was so archaic. Like even so, and for years we used to, like we did nutritional consulting for years, but so people with diabetes or somebody coming off heart disease or a heart attack or something would go to the hospital and get the dietary aid to give them advice. It was all based on Canada's Food Guide, which was high in carbohydrates, high in dairy, your four corners of balanced food groups. It was so ridiculous. It was creating disease, right? So so it really needs some advancement. So hopefully they have changed. I haven't seen the new one yet.
Half the plates.
Yeah.
Good,
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah.
And the other half is empty. That would be perfect, yeah, okay. So, yeah.
It's interesting.
No, that's good though, yeah, that's fantastic, yeah. Okay, folks, well, thanks for coming, appreciate it, yep. All right. And, listen, if anybody has any questions or concerns, you're welcome to talk to us anytime personally, or make an appointment, we can sit down and go over things for you, okay?
I mean, no,
Hey, you know what, you know your stuff. Well, that's good.
My dad is 88 years old. And when my mom used to fry, he used to dip the bread in the bacon, and he's still alive. It all depends on he's 88 years old. He's doing all right. Yeah, and he smoked. He smoked, he did everything, and he's still here. It all depends.
and speaking of that, I've been to South growing up.
Right. It all depends on you have years. My dad used to go from one person
Exercise.
and he would have no cholesterol. He'd go to the doctor. He would, you know, when you have the picnic camp, you know, the lumber, he would spread that on his bread.
But he wasn't eating margaritas and butter, he wasn't eating, they were eating, your dad never ate macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, there wasn't any.
They had KFC once or twice a week. Yes, they did. My mom used to.
They didn't have fast food.
I remember that, cancer, cancer and.
You know, I don't tell you why. Because you got a remote, you got Alexa turning your lights on and everything. You don't even want to get up anymore and walk over. It's exercise. It's the truth.
Yeah, everybody, even the sitting at
Our kids, how many kids do you see outside? When I was a kid, on my bicycle, I was in the car. They'd have to chase me inside. You see, what do you see kids doing now? Nothing.
yeah, you look
Playing
at
video
it
games.
and you look outside, there's nobody. Right? Yeah,
That's right. I used to ride my bike. That's
Oh, that's good, I'm glad.